Hey, welcome. So, we live in a world that is just flooded with screens and text, right? It's everywhere. And it makes you wonder, how do we actually connect with ancient wisdom anymore? Well, today we're going to dive into a totally revolutionary approach to scripture. It's one that's designed not for your eyes, but for your ears. And believe me, it's reaching millions in our digital age. So, let's get into it. So, let me just start with this question. What if the most powerful way to understand the Bible had nothing to do with reading at all? Now, I know that sounds like a wild idea, but it really gets to the heart of a new movement that's changing how millions of people are engaging with these ancient texts. To really get this shift, we first have to wrap our heads around a pretty surprising fact about our modern world. We tend to think of ourselves as a planet of readers, but the data tells a very, very different story. Let's just start with the numbers, because the scale of this is kind of staggering. According to UNESCO data that Dr. Romerlito Macalino points to, a full 13% of the world's population is non-literate. We're talking about over a billion people for whom a printed book is a barrier, not a bridge to understanding. But honestly, that number doesn't even tell the whole story. It's actually much bigger. You see, many more people deal with what's called functional illiteracy. They might have gone to school, they can technically sound out the words, but they really struggle to understand complex ideas in a text. And that creates this huge gap between just seeing information and actually getting it. And here's the really interesting twist in all this. Our digital habits are actually making all of us more like oral learners. I mean, think about it. If you listen to podcasts, if you watch video explainers like this one, or you listen to audiobooks, you are part of what experts call secondary orality. We're in a new digital era where we often prefer to learn by hearing and watching, just like ancient cultures did for centuries. So you can see where this is going, right? We've got this fundamental clash. On one hand, you have these ancient texts that we've traditionally studied through silent, individual reading. And on the other, you have this modern world of digital natives who are learning more and more by listening together as a community. And you can see that contrast so clearly right here. Traditional study is completely dependent on a printed text. It's analytical, and it's often something you do all by yourself. But oral Bible study is what's called oral epistemological, which is just a fancy way of saying that you gain knowledge by hearing and speaking with other people. The focus shifts to internalizing a story as a group, relying on your shared memory, not just on whether you can read. So the big question is, how do you possibly bridge that gap? Well, that is exactly where the work of Dr. Romerlito Macalino comes in. He's developed this truly innovative framework he calls the Disciple-Making Oral Bible Strategy, or DOBS for short, and it's designed specifically for our growing oral digital world. Okay, so how does this DOBS method actually work? What does it look like in practice? Well, the answer is in this really powerful but simple learning process. It's like the engine that drives the whole thing. It's called developmental spiral syntax. Yeah, I know that sounds super complex, but the idea behind it is actually simple and, frankly, brilliant. It's not about just memorizing facts. Instead, it's a spiral of learning where every new insight builds on the last one. And it's always connecting the story back to the learner's own culture, their own history, their own lives. And at the very core of this whole method is this simple three-step cycle. Think of it as a journey that makes sure understanding doesn't just stay in your head, but moves to your heart and finally into your hands. Let's break that down real quick. So the first cycle is all about the head. It's the visualize step. After a group hears a story, the very first question is simple. What did you see? This gets everybody on the same page, picturing the scene, the people, what happened, and in what order. It builds this shared, factual foundation for everything else. Then, once that foundation is set, the process moves from the head to the heart. The question changes to, how did the story make you feel? And this is such a crucial shift. You're moving from just objective facts to a subjective, emotional connection. It's what allows people to really interiorize the story and find out what it means to them personally. And finally, we get to the hand, the actualize step. The last question is the most important one. What will you do because of this story? Because, just knowing something or feeling something isn't enough. It has to lead to action. This final step is what makes the whole lesson tangible and truly transformative out in the real world. Now, that all sounds like a fantastic theory, right? Head, heart, hand. But the real question is, does it actually work? Does this cycle really create lasting change? For that, we're going to look at a really powerful real-world example. Our story takes us to Mount Elgon in Kenya back in May of 2022. This was the location of the very first on-the-ground Dobbs training right after the global pandemic lockdown started to lift. You can just imagine the need and the hunger for this kind of connection were huge. And get this, an incredible 10 distinct oral, Bible-less ethno-linguistic communities all came together for this training. Just pause and think about that. These were 10 different groups of people who had never, ever had access to scripture in their own heart language. And the results were, well, they were just stunning. Dr. Macalino reports this amazing transformation among the Pokot people, who were one of the groups there. Through this oral strategy, belief just exploded, and new communities started to form, all without a single printed page. I mean, look at this. The impact was so concrete, so measurable. Churches didn't just hang on, they grew, and new ones were planted. In a really short amount of time, these 10 communities orally worked through the entire New Testament. And it didn't even stop there. It created a hunger to keep going, to get into the Old Testament. This kind of incredible success, though, it forces us to ask a bigger, really important question. If a translation isn't a printed book, then how in the world do you measure its quality? What does success even look like anymore? And this right here, this is the paradigm shift. The old model for written texts, sometimes called CANA, was all about technical perfection. Is the text clear, accurate, natural, and approved by some outside expert? But the Dobbs model uses something called a spiritual impact matrix, or SIM, and the questions are completely different. Is it creating transformation? Is it making disciples? Is the community growing? And maybe most importantly, do they own it? Is it theirs? What this all boils down to is a fundamental change in the goal itself. It's a massive shift away from creating a perfect, static product, like a flawless book sitting on a shelf, and toward fostering a proven, dynamic impact, a living, breathing, transformed community. And that really leaves us with this final, powerful question to chew on. When we're talking about sharing ancient wisdom in our modern world, what is the actual goal? Is it to produce a finished book? Or is it to see a transformed life? The answer to that question might just change how we communicate everything that truly matters.